word for the questions. And I would like to remind each presenter that we, again, to keep with the time, 10 minutes of presentation, and then we'll have the questions. Yes, so the first presentation we have is from Bruna Lobo. The work title is Sustainable Development and Mental Health in Portuguese-speaking African Countries, a Comparative Analysis. Bruna Lobo is an international development professional with a master's in humanitarian action, cooperation and development, postgraduate in development cooperation, project management, and a degree in psychology. She has coordinated projects in Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, Sao Tome and Principe, and Brazil in the areas of water, oral health, mental health, education, and inclusion of disabled people. So, Bruna Lobo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Diana. Let me put here this top. Okay, are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay. And now it's okay? Yep. So thank you. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about the sustainable development and mental health in Portuguese-speaking African countries, a comparative analysis. Well, my name is Bruna. I'm from Brazil, living in Portugal, living and working in Portugal for 6 years. I'm a psychologist and project manager for development cooperation with experience in countries such as Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and São Tomé e Príncipe, of course, Brazil. And also, I would like to explain that this work is academic work, was carried out as part of the postgraduate course in development cooperation project management by the Portuguese Catholic University, and it needs scientific review. So I would like to move on to the methodology. I have divided in 3 different phases. The phase 1, I've collected data from Mental Health Atlas by the World Health Organization, which means burden of mental illness, disability adjusted life years, the mental health service available, and national mental health plans. Also, the human resource for mental health and the economic issues associated with this area. As I said before, in this study, I considered the Portuguese-speaking African countries like Angola, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Mozambique, and São Tomé e Príncipe with data from 2017. In my phase 2, I considered the studies carried out by Lund, Charlson, Chisholm, and Bruckner, conducting the following order of analysis with population data, prevalence of disease, severe expected case, number of beds needed to cover the service, and number of human resource required. In the phase 3, for data treatment, it was necessary to consider for each country the estimated population above the 15 years old, which is a critical period considered in the literature as the fundamental one of the onset of the mental illness, and to include the criteria of the coverage ratio of mental health service for every 100,000 inhabitants. So, let me see, it's not moving. Okay, now I would like to look at the mental health and sustainable development, which I consider is really, really important, because some studies indicate that the socioeconomic conditions of certain groups represent an increased risk for development of mental illness, depression, and also lower well-being. So depression, for example, is considered 1.52 times more prevalent in this case, and as well as schizophrenia is 8 times more at risk in specific population in low-income countries. For this reason, the exposure of people to adverse social, economic, and environmental conditions I directly relate to the individual's ability to work, develop their potential, and contribute to their community. In addition, our region's mental health conditions contribute to poor health outcomes, premature death, human rights violations, and global and national economic loss. On the other hand, a good mental health will allow greater productivity and income, better employment, high education level, better protection and promotion of human rights, better health status, and better quality of life, which consequently will infer on many of the developing results. For this reason, the theme of mental health goes beyond just a matter of health, despite being responsible for a large part of the global burden of disease, such as the psychiatric disorders are responsible for more years lived with disability, that is around 32%, and sub-Saharan Africa is estimated to be approximately 19%. However, apart being an important global issue, it still, unfortunately, it still remains neglected by states and national and international organizations. And I'm focused on a specific, the mental health for Portuguese-speaking African countries, because I have seen that some studies reveal that the language is also an important problem to the implementation of international researches. So, moving to the prevalence of mental illness and substance abuse in Portuguese-speaking African countries, the 5 countries represented a population around 63 million people, an average profile of the population over 15 years old, around 58%. Cape Verde represents the largest percentage with 71%. So as you can see in the graphic, major depressive disorder contributes on a large scale for the burden of disease in these African countries, and in sub-Saharan Africa account for approximately 40% of the years with disability. So consider that Cape Verde has largest population, about 15 years old. Also, it is expected the country will have the highest number of severe cases in mental health, around 4,419 cases per year for every 100,000 inhabitants. And you can see the other countries here in the graph. So to face the number of severe cases per year and per 100,000 inhabitants, I have calculated the number of bed needs and the mental health workforce required for each country in the comparative analysis. And also globally, in terms of number of health professions, according to World Health Organization, 6.6 psychiatrists per 100 inhabitants in high-income countries, compared to less than 0.5 in medium and low-income countries. Of course, the majority, it's important to see that the majority of psychiatrists are based in the urban areas, and due to the transport issues, the care provided by this profession is often not available to population established in rural areas. So also, I have checked the availability for national mental health plans. And my comparative analysis for Guinea-Bissau, the only country who doesn't have a national mental health plan, Angola, the national health plan for 2018 and 2010 to 2022 resulted in that at least 50% of the municipal health units have integrated services in the area of mental health. In Mozambique, they have a plan since 2016, and some programs carry out at regional level, such as for epilepsy and substance abuse. Moving to bed numbers, from the data presented by each country, it isn't possible to verify the low available service, especially number of beds per 100,000 inhabitants. For the PSAC, countries should have an average of 22 beds per 100,000 inhabitants, with Cape Verde with the greatest needs, 28 beds, and Guinea-Bissau and Angola with the lowest need, 20 beds. In terms of number of psychiatrists, Guinea-Bissau has 2.3 times less than Cape Verde, thus presenting greater growth challenge to face its difficulties. In relation to nurses, the needs that are presented are high for all countries, especially for Cape Verde and São Tomé e Príncipe. Cape Verde's situation is also 4.4 times higher than Angola in number of nurses. It's important to mention the absence of data, right, from these professionals for Mozambique and São Tomé e Príncipe. Not going. Okay, so in conclusion, Cape Verde and Angola are the countries that present the greatest challenge in terms of scalability of service, especially Cape Verde due to the age profile and the high prevalence of mental illness, especially schizophrenia and epilepsy in the dimension. However, despite presenting good data in terms of psychiatry and psychosocial support, It will be important to check the concentration of this profession in the country for more detailed analysis. Also in Angola, the prevalence of major depressive disorder is high, which is why it's extremely important to adopt strategies and programs that meet these demands. In Mozambique, for example, despite the existence of a program in the country to reduce the use of substances such as alcohol and drugs, the prevalence rates shown are really high. So in this case, in order to achieve reduction in prevalence rates, Mozambique will need to invest, of course, in the expansion and training of its mental health profession in this area. In São Tomé e Príncipe, for example, analyses have shown that is the country with the highest cost, around $400 per person per year on the mental health, and its services are almost exclusively dependent on external cooperation such as Cuba and Portugal. And Guinea-Bissau has a high cost on mental health, and despite the fact that the present study has shown a low prevalence in mental health illness in comparison with the other countries due to the lack of epidemiological study and a strategic mental health plan for the country, it's believed that the prevalence data presented may be underestimated. So, in the example, mental health and sustainable development goal should be incorporated into other actions, both in the area of health, primary care and community care, as well in other areas, such as education and access to employment. And the analysis showed that all countries present challenges to expand their coverage service, both for inpatient and outpatient care, and mainly to decentralized service by expanding them to the community level and primary health care. So this is my reference. And thank you to listen.
Thank you very much, Bruna, for this amazing presentation. And yes, I believe we are all need to look into those issues because it's one of the neglected subjects and topics in maybe in Sub-Saharan Africa. I'm going to post the first question.
Okay.
Okay, so thank you for your interesting presentation. In an area under research, what are the data fidelity, the Cape Verde number are related to this?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm not listening. Thank you.
Yes. So I'm going to post the questions. I'm going to post the questions in the chat also. Thank you for your interesting presentation in an area under research. What are the data fidelity? The Cape Verde number are related to this. That's the.
Actually, yes, I found some research from Mozambique specifically, and they show that under research in this area because of the language. One of the points is the most researches that are made now in the mental health area is in countries that probably speak English, and the situation with the Portuguese countries speaking language Portuguese, it's under research. So I found some research in Mozambique.
Thank you. So we have the second question here. Why is this important issue so peripheral for the states concerned and even in the SDGs for international actors?
Okay, the second.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I have some delay.
Yes, so one of our participants asked, why is this issue, which is very important, it's so peripheral for the states concerned with.
Yes, okay, I listen now. As I explained in my presentation, it's really important because it's related to socioeconomic conditions. Some states as I show you, some studies indicate the socio-economic conditions of certain groups increase risk for the development of mental illness, depression, and low well-being. So if you consider the areas of with the SDG, we should apply mental health in different areas like education, employment. That's why it's the SDG, the mental health goes to how can I explain? We infer in many of the development results if you not consider the mental health. That's why it's so important this area in the SDGs.
Thank you. We have a question from Esai. How can we, in resource scarce countries of Africa, where it's shared among many problems, how can we prioritize this problem and where can we get the resource from?
Right, it is a difficult topic. Maybe I don't have the right answer because it's really difficult when the resources are low. Of course, we have established some points in mental health to develop this area that we should address. And I have 5 leading grand challenge for the global, right, mental health, like integrate the core package of mental health service in the primary healthcare should be a good step, and reduce, of course, the cost and improve the supply of effective psychotropic drugs for mental health. And an important thing is training for health professionals. And so if I'm in a country with low resource, I remember one experience. I don't know I don't remember the country, but I know the experience when we teach and when we give capability to person with non-specialized in mental health, but we can give her to, in this country specific, I remember, they teach people or women that have a good position in their community to learn how to provide a psychosocial intervention. So I don't need a lot of resource, but in terms of training, we can do this. We can teach people that have a good position in the community to provide a psychosocial intervention in the community. So besides that, a community base is an important action to do with chronic mental illness, for example, and also strengthening the mental health component in the training of healthcare professionals to create an equitable distribution of mental health providers.
Nayana, you have to. You are muted.
Yeah, sorry. We have the last 2 questions here. The slide is still open for more questions. So Denise asked if does the mental health issues has to do with the fact that people don't have economic and social status?
Yes, actually following studies, as I explained before, is higher when we have low access to education, when we have low access to food and other things and basic needs. The prevalence of schizophrenia and depression, following the studies, considered high in this situation. That's why studies should come and the prevalence is higher than other countries. Because of the lack of access, of course, to good.
Yes, we still have a couple of questions that maybe your opinion, like what would you like to see as the first step in terms of public policy?
In terms of first steps in public policy, well, investment for mental health, it's a good start. Now, we have following the World Bank criteria, in low and medium income countries, the expenditure to mental health is around 25 cents per person and should have around $2, $3 per person. In high income countries, now it's $2 and should be the double. So it would be a good start, invest more in mental health and expand to the intervention in a community base, and coverage all the mental health in primary health care. We should apply mental health. Would be a good start, investment and training and implementation of the mental health as a community base.
Yes, Bruna Lobo, thank you very much for this amazing presentation. And maybe we can have a round of applause. We have more questions in the chat, but maybe we could continue to discuss about them during the break sessions. We have to move on to the next presentation. So for the next presentation, we have Christopher Hinegbu. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing the name. The title of the work is Mapping Social Vulnerability to Healthcare Emergencies, a study of sustainable healthcare delivery in Nigeria. So Christopher is a graduate assistant in the Department of Geography at the University of Nigeria. He's a student of the Joint Master in Geography of Environmental Risks and Human Security at the United Nations University, EHS, and University of Bonn. His area of interest are in GIS, medical geography, environmental hazards, African environment, and climate change and adaptation pathways. Yes. Christopher, if you're ready, you may have the floor.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, share screen. So, yeah, so you can see my screen now, right? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, good, thank you. So, I was presenting on the topic mapping social vulnerability to healthcare emergencies, implication for sustainable healthcare delivery in Nigeria. So let's get going. Yeah, so this is the outline, introduction, the study objective, the methods, the results, and then the reflections. So introduction, yeah. So we all know about COVID-19 and how it came about in China, sometimes in 2019, and then it came into Africa sometimes in March of 2020. Oh, sorry, in 2020, and then into Nigeria in February. In the same 2020. So why have I chosen this particular study area for this study contest? Yeah, because during the same COVID-19 outbreak, there was also a yellow fever outbreak in the same area, and then we all know what this can mean for the healthcare system, especially in places where healthcare is unreliable. So and here we can see the definition of public healthcare emergencies by the National Disaster Medical System. For the sake of time, I won't go through it. I will just flip through it for the sake of time. Yeah, so yeah, sustainable healthcare and all of that. So I will just flip through it. Now, so what is the overall objective of this study? Of course, so the overall aim is to examine social vulnerability to healthcare emergencies in the study area, and then to achieve this, the following objectives would be accomplished. examining the vulnerability to COVID-19 and yellow fever. Then
Hello. Hi. Yeah, I am just
Sorry.
Okay, so thank you. Then we have to also examine the combined vulnerability of the study area to COVID-19 and yellow fever, and then provide policy recommendation. Yes, so this is the study area. The study area is Enugu State in Nigeria, and it consists of 17 local government areas. So what local government can mean, for example, in a place like Germany, we have the federal, then the Bundes, and then the Kreisau. So yeah, so local government is like the smallest political unit. Yes, so. And then yes, now the method employed for this study. So this the method employed can be categorized into three. Yeah. So first is let's say data sourcing. Then the second step is the data visualization, and then the third step is the performance of the weighted overlay analysis using ArcGIS 10.7. So what this weighted overlay does is that it tends to consider a multiple data in the sense that it considers various data and then determine their combined effects using different weights or different rates. So the researcher has to categorize the various data based on their level of importance in the study area, and then get a combined effect of the various data sets. So from here we can see the various data employed, the source, and yeah, so we have the yellow fever incidence, we have the distance to major healthcare facilities, we have distance to PSCs, type of primary healthcare centers, which are the closest to the people before the major healthcare facilities. We have the healthcare infrastructures, COVID-19 incidents, and then proportion of the population above 65 years. That was used for the COVID-19 analysis, because we know that older people are more vulnerable to the infection. So yeah, so the data analysis, like I explained, yeah. So we first determine the social vulnerability to yellow fever using the same steps I just explained. Next thing, also the weighting process I also explained. Then determine also the social vulnerability to COVID-19, and then the combined effect. So this is just an overview of the data employed in this study. So and how they varied across the different LGs, and of course maps were used to visualize them. The first one here is in terms of distance from major healthcare centers, and you can see the lighter brown color shows the closest or the minimal distance to major healthcare centers, and then this other one shows them, the second map there shows them distance to primary healthcare centers. Yeah, this one shows the proportion of healthcare infrastructures per 100,000 inhabitants in the study area. So if you look at the legends, you will get a better understanding of what where different LGAs fall into in this category. Yeah. So now the weighting process for the yellow fever vulnerability. So for the purpose of this studies, I categorize the various data into four. As you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4. One stands for the very high vulnerability, 2 high vulnerability, 3 moderate vulnerability, and the 4 is low vulnerability. So the various data were grouped into 4 different classes, 4 equal classes, and then we categorize based on their. So for instance, places with the farthest distance from the healthcare centers fell into the very high vulnerability index, because of course when the healthcare centers are very far, you know that they are not so accessible to the population. So that is an example or an instance for how this rating was done. Then of course they were done in the ArcGIS 10.7, and then for the yellow fever we got this final map, and then and then we have this table here showing the different different pattern that developed from the analysis, and then the different LGAs that fell into those patterns as well as their numbers. Then we did the same thing for the COVID-19 vulnerability. Yeah, we can see the COVID-19 cases, the proportion of population above 65 years, and the rest of them. So we repeated the same process in ArcGIS, and then we got the final map showing the COVID-19 vulnerability pattern and the LGAs, and showing the pattern that each LGA fell into, as you can see on the map and in the table beside it. Yes. Yeah, so now I now weighted the yellow fever and COVID-19 together to get a combined effect. Now showing the vulnerability of the study area to medical emergencies. Of course, medical emergencies are include COVID-19, yellow fever, Ebola outbreak, and the rest of them. So in this context, we just use them yellow fever and COVID-19 to generate a medical emergency vulnerability of the study area. So in simple terms, the result shows that a total of 10 LGs out of the 17 shows either a very high or high vulnerability to healthcare emergencies. This is as a result of the poor healthcare system in the States and the country in general. And then I went further to highlight two other major stories that supported this assertion. Yes. So so sustainable healthcare and communities, SDG 3 and 11, how has it been implied in this study? What are the implications for that? And so here we can see the existing situation in terms of infant mortality, maternal mortality, life expectancy at birth, and doctors to patient ratio in Nigeria, and then in another advanced country, just to get a glimpse of what the current situation is. Then I highlighted some major key questions which we need to answer: infrastructural disparities between urban and rural areas, and sustainable healthcare communities, infectious disease.
Sorry, Christopher.
Yeah.
If you may wrap up, you have a half a minute left. Okay,
thank you. So yeah, sorry. So the final relation between the SDG 3 good health and well-being, as you can see on the screen, and preventable deaths of infants and newborn, achieve universal health coverage. This has not been achieved because the study already showed that more healthcare facilities were located in the urban areas and the rural areas were neglected, and also in terms of reduce the number of deaths from people affected from disasters. It has not been achieved because we still have these issues occurring. So what is the implication? The interaction of this disease outbreak and the existing healthcare condition could overwhelm the existing poor infrastructure.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, we would like to hear more from you, definitely, but we have time constraints here.
Yes. So
thank you very much for this presentation.
Yes.
Now I'm waiting for the questions for our participants. Maybe I will start with my question, my personal question. Okay. Is you're talking about the state level, mostly talking about the state level, but have you looked and have you seen some let's say have you looked at the local social, economic, and cultural status of people, and if that sort of influences the fact that they don't have a good healthcare system, or they don't get access to better healthcare?
Okay, and so the question you asked is the different research on its own entirely. Like, yes, So if you want to, this is looking at the spatial variation. So if you want to look at the social, the cultural context, then it's a different research entirely. But in the final page of the slide, I did highlighted some studies that looked at that and stated that key findings, and that they agreed with what I posited in the work. So yeah, so I actually did a review of the national situation at in this context, and then so in terms of the social context, we have to consider people's financial status, because that also determines if they have access to healthcare, because of course the health system is not like in the advanced countries where everyone has this equal access to basic healthcare. So it's a matter of if you can afford the limited services available, because you pay for everything. There's no automatic healthcare insurance for everybody. So that is also a factor to consider if you are looking at social and cultural context. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer. We have another question here. Like, how do you see the future evolutions of your research?
How
do you see the future of your research, like the evolutions of your research?
Okay, yes. So yes, I did highlighted it in the slide, but I could not explain it. So yes, so in terms of the future of the research, so I see I would anticipate that more research can be done to estimate for the number of doctors, the number of nurses, the number of hospitals per bed, because these data are not available. So yes, so more as a to this kind of data would enable a more credible research to be done, especially at the local level. Yeah, so those are the future of the research that I envisage. Yeah.
Amazing. We have a question from Mesai. How would you correlate COVID vulnerability with access to health institutions? Countries with best access failed to protect the society from COVID.
Yeah. So now I would say that countries with better health system and have or like have a number of cases, like have many COVID-19 cases in comparison to the African countries, something like that. For instance, people still don't believe that COVID exists, like back in many African countries. So this research is a vulnerability research that's saying that if we should have the same number of cases in, let's say, for instance, in Germany and in Nigeria, this is what it will look like. So because we don't have the same number of cases, so this research might not be valued. But then when we have the same number of cases, then we would understand what the research is trying to say, because it's trying to say that this is how the vulnerability index would be. So let's now assume that we have the same number of cases we have in Germany, in Nigeria. So then it will be a matter of death souls all over the places. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say in the research. Yes.
Thank you very much, Christopher. We may have probably the last question, or I could take one more later on. The person has a question about public acceptance of vaccines, which was yellow fever or COVID-19, etc., which was indicated on one of the slides in the presentation. And the person is asking if people are willing to vaccinate.
Okay, so my answer will be based on my answer will be subjective, because this is the kind of more I won't be stating a fact, because I did not conduct any research on that. But based on my personal interaction and my close networks and then social media, people don't want the vaccine like in my country. Like, we have this complicated story in relation to mark of the beast, and the Western country trying to control population in Africa and stuff like that. And so, yeah, even when I speak with my mom, she'll be like, "Don't take any vaccine." So yeah, so people don't want the vaccine. So and so what the government is trying to do is that the government in Nigeria tries to portray the vaccine as not being harmful, and then they mandated all government officials, like let's say the governors, the ministers, and then to take the vaccine in public, and then publicize them on TV, so that people can see that, okay, this person already got vaccinated and it's not harmful. So yeah, so it has not been publicly accepted back home, but effort have been made to deconstruct the conspiracy theory surrounding the vaccination and all of that. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Christopher. I would like to remind everyone that during the break session, we will have the opportunity to, if some questions are raised, like in the meantime, you'll have the opportunity to talk with the presenters. And thank you very much, Christopher. We may give a round of applause to Christopher. We move on to the next presenter, who is Teresa Henriquez, whose work is titled Intervention in Children and Young People with Physical Disabilities in Sao Tome and Principe. Teresa is a basic education teacher of geography with a master's degree in educational sciences, and also a postgraduate in geographic information system, and has interest in hygiene, health, and safety. Teresa, if you're ready, then the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon. I'm here to talk about a project we made, and I talk we because the project was made by 3 persons, but unfortunately they can't be here today. And I'm presenting not an academic paper, but a project that wasn't yet implemented. And the project was an intervention in children and young people with these physical disabilities in São Tomé and Príncipe. And we're talking about all day about the 2030 agenda and the sustainable development goals, and that they are a very important step for the planet and for disadvantaged populations, and they allow populations of the developing countries to reach a higher level of human development. The SDGs are really a great challenge for mankind and an important awareness raising regarding disadvantaged populations. Our association, A Rising Child, was born in 2018, and we elaborated a cooperation development project for São Tomé and Príncipe, and we named the project CARO, Children Are Our Legacy. And São Tomé and Príncipe is really a paradise, but the other side of the coin is that they have a very young population, poor housing conditions, deficient road system, weak production and commercial capacity, and high levels of unemployment. What about children with physical disabilities? We use a study on disability in São Tomé and Príncipe made by Instituto Politécnico de Santarém, and we noticed that in this district of Lobata, there were 117 children with motor disabilities, but 82.9 did not attend school. And we think, what happened to these children? And we pose ourselves some issues. Why aren't these children attending school? Have these children the future conditioned by the lack of access? And we link those problems with the SDGs, and we're talking about SDG 4, quality education, and targets 4.5 and 4.7. Eliminating all discrimination in education and have education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Accessibility of places is a problem, especially in these countries with low income. And due to these barriers, people with disabilities have problems in getting access not only to school, but later a decent job. If these children don't attend school, what will their future be? How can they integrate labor markets? How can they achieve economic independence and equal opportunities? And now we're talking about SDG 8, decent work and economic growth, and target 8.5, full employment and decent work with equal pay. We have to break the cycle associated with disabilities. The average person in developing countries face daily unemployment, poverty, economic dependence, but people with disabilities have, in spite of those problems, other problems, and especially prejudice and discrimination. And we have to break this cycle. More issues we pose if these children's families don't think it's important and necessary to take them to school. How can a society do something as a whole? Can cultural issues related to disabilities be a barrier to the future of these children? And we talk about now the link to SDG 10, reduced inequalities in and within countries, and target specifically target 10.2, promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion. We need to work with the families because many times the prejudice and segregation begins within the family, and we must extend those work with to the community and society in general, in a joint work to raise awareness, sensibilization, and mobilization towards the disability carriers. Is it possible that these children are not going to school because they haven't got means to move or mobility aids? Is it for lack of means of travel? Do they have adapted school transport? Is it due to difficulties in access and architectural barriers in school and houses? SDG 11 says about sustainable cities and communities, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, and specifically target 11.2 and 11.7 that talks about inclusive and sustainable transport and access. It's urgent, I sleep last one. We have to create accessible, inclusive, and adapted spaces to promote job opportunities to all individuals with disability. We have to change social paradigms to promote equal opportunities to all. Sorry. And if you can do a serious job with the family, with the community, and with local authorities, will that lead to a change in the future of these children? Is the collaboration of families an essential element for success of the project? How can partnerships strengthen the means to implement the necessary actions in a project? We link these problems with SDG 17, Partnership for the Goals, and target 17.9, enhance SDG capacity in developing countries, and target 17.16, enhance the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. This is a too deeply cultural issue in families and communities and even in countries. The world needs to be a place for everybody, not just for some. We need to fight so that the sentence equal opportunity to all really means what it stands for. And what actions do you intend to implement to achieve those issues? To access the problem of access to education, we intend to train teachers and other school workers. Force the problem social and cultural constraints. We intend to do sensibilization sessions for the families. For the mobility problems, rehabilitation through physiotherapy and other necessary techniques and distribution of mobility aids. The accessibility problems, eliminating architectural barriers, and to assure the continuity of the project, we intend to establish local partnerships, not only with families, but other associations and local government. The researchers, as I said, was my colleagues Ana Catarina Bandeira, Andrea Costa, and myself. And a special thanks to my friend Rosa Fajardo, that was the translator, and thank you all.
Thank you very much, Teresa, for this presentation and for that issue. Again, an issue very important that was raised. And thank you for keeping with the time limit. So I'm going to check the questions again. If you have any question, you may just check in the chat. The password is in the chat for Slido. The first question we have is going to school ensuring quality education?
Yes. That's why we intend to, it's important to do some work with the teachers and getting them to be aware of the inclusive education, that is important. And many times it isn't really yet done.
You're muted.
I was unmuted, yeah, thank you. The second question is, how is the collaboration with local researchers for this project?
Well, as I said, we use a study that was made in 2012 by an institute to Polytechnic Santarém. They were able to go to São Tomé and do the research and have some inquiries about the disability and with children and all levels of education. And that was the base of our study. And local researchers, we haven't got any contacts in that area with local researchers.
Yeah, we have the questions in. I am sorry. Okay.
Can I go on? We
Yeah.
were lucky to go to São Tomé, do a visit, and we established some contacts with some locals and some organization for disability persons. And it was a very interesting visit, and we are able to see locally really the problems. And I don't know if we can ever implement this project, but it would be a very important implementation. We were able to see 2 schools, and we went to the local hospital, and there was only 4 physiotherapists working there, and they have to go normally to Portugal to have their training, and they really need some help.
Maybe just like a follow-up on what your last comment is. So how would you improve the teacher skills, and also what will be the practical evolution of the project?
The question 3, is it? And 4?
Yes.
Okay.
3 and 4.
We hope to can really apply this project, and if we can, we have many intents to do some things, to do many things, but we have the will, but we don't have yet the how. We don't have money, we don't have partnerships, the right partnerships, and we have still not enough human resources. So for the time being is still on paper. And the question about the yes, we haven't got time to do some partnerships with the local institutions, except an association for disability locally. So we couldn't yet have partnership with religious institutions or other ones.
Yes, and someone also asked if you were actually, if there are some success models from other projects and if you are applying them in this particular project. And if so, what were the impacts?
We have just a week ago noticed an association, and it's a Spanish association that has been work with in São Tomé in this area, the disability and with children. But as I said, we only know this for last week when we are trying to do this presentation. So we haven't yet contacted them, and but they were there for 2009 and 2000 till 2017. So the project has some continuity, but we intend to contact this organization and to see how they could do this project there, so we can learn with them.
Thank you very much, Teresa. That was fantastic. Thank you everyone for your time, and thank you, Teresa, for the presentation and for the good discussion and conversation we had here.
Thank you.
Yes, so here comes the end of this session. We may we may have a short break of half an hour, and Roy will again open the break room chat, the break rooms for networking.
Yeah, I'll put the rules if you want to talk with someone. So a reminder is random. So have a nice break. See you in half an hour.
And good afternoon to you all. If you can hear me, you can just say unmute and say good afternoon, or just do a thumbs up or send a reaction.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, we can hear you.
Great. If your technology and your setting allows it, maybe you could turn your video on. I think you'll admit that it's more interesting to talk to faces than to pictures. Thank you. I see videos turning on. We really appreciate your being with us through these 3 sessions. It's been 3 sessions of very interesting presentations and equally interesting questions and discussions. We enter the final session, and we are going to have presentations on research and education, as you will see in the 3 presentations we are going to have. And we begin with our very own gentleman, Odunola Oladeji. I know that some of you might have met him already, but for official purposes, he's going to be speaking on Western education and the fate of sociocultural production in sub-Saharan Africa, particularly a case study of the Yorubas in southwestern Nigeria. Deji is a development and data enthusiast with experience in agri-food system, economic planning, policy analysis, and democratic process. He's also a student of AMAS, as am I. Deji, if you are ready for us, we are ready for you too.
All right, thank you very much. Let me share this. Yeah, so can we all see the screen? Yeah, so amazing. Thank you very much. I'll be presenting a paper on Western education and the fate of sociocultural reproduction in sub-Saharan Africa. Then I'll be looking at a case study of Yorubas in southwestern Nigeria. All right, so briefly, in the course of this presentation, I'll be looking at the case of language in the sociocultural reproduction discourse, and then also see theoretical framework upon which education and sociocultural reproduction is established. And then ultimately, I will be reflecting on Western education and indigenous epistemology in Southwest Nigeria. And lastly, I will be seeing decolonizing education as a panacea to sociocultural reproduction. All right, before I commence, can I crave your indulgence to briefly reflect on this question? Have you ever asked yourself, in what language do you think? Do you meditate? Do you critique? Do you analyze? Do you dream? So I believe when you have enough answers to that question or reflection, then this particular presentation will make more sense. All right, of course, this product of colonial modernity, what I tag colonial modernity, and then the colonial millennium and the complexity of interference on the culture and identity of indigenous groups still lingers with pockets of influence. And then of recent, there have been cry for realignment to cultural stock and historic antecedents, as well as emerging campaigns for indigenous knowledge inclusion. And then it is worth noting that cultures in Africa are well historicized outside the realms of colonization. However, this cultural knowledge has been ostracized within the purview of modernity, pari passu the hegemonic dominance of the seemingly superior valid knowledge in cult, which thus far shaped and formed the experiences of African descent. And what we have as of recent is a gradual homogenization and mimicking of Western styles in practically all sectors. And this emerging social and cultural formation is fast reproducing in that order, which is a threat to sustenance and perpetuation of indigenous knowledge and culture. And it is upon this background and backdrop that I will be working on three objectives. Number one is to problematize linguistic hegemony and the proliferation of Western culture amongst the Yorubas in Southwest Nigeria. Then secondly, I want to assess the impact of formal education commodification on sociocultural reproduction in the region. And lastly, I'm going to be mapping a scholastic framework on decolonizing education in the region. Without controversy, I hope you agree with me that language remains the most significant element and vehicle of any culture, a marker of identity, tool for self-realization, and a conduit through which expressions can be communicated, and a medium through which knowledge is transferred. Of course, in the education discourse, the language of education is as important too, and in the African reality, English language as well as other languages adopted as the lingua franca has gained wide acceptance and uncontested medium of communication due to the dynamic multicultural and multilingual characteristics of countries, particularly in the sub-Saharan Africa region. And the existence of colonial language dominance in this region is gradually subverting the acquisition, the learning, and the use of African languages. And in the case of Nigeria, there are concerns around the language shift, which is gradually implementing to graduate language loss, particularly in this particular region under consideration. And then we want to see is, has there been theoretical framework upon which a parallel has been drawn between education and social reproduction? Yes, of course, there are a lot of scholastic works that have been done, prominent of which is the work of Bode and Passaron, who posited that sociocultural theory assumes that learning cannot be dissociated from interpersonal interactions located in cultural framework. And recently, we have the work of Bernstein, who drew the nexus between socio-linguistic and educational codes, delineating how class regulates the structure of communication within a family, which then translates to the initial socio-linguistic coding orientation of the children. Of course, this will be dissected explicitly in the subsequent slide. Then right now, we'll be dissecting the etymology of education commodification in southwestern Nigeria. Of course, unlike other regions in the country, southwestern Nigeria is notable for its economic hub. Of course, seated deep within it is Lagos State, which is undeniably one of the largest economic base in the continent of Africa. And also another thing worth noting is the commercial capital. And then the education institution. Of course, according to statistics, 3 of the first 5 universities in Nigeria are situated in this region. And also 54, presently 54 of 174 universities in Nigeria can be found in the southwestern part of the country. By implication, 1/3 of every citadel of learning in Nigeria is sited deep within this region called the southwestern part of Nigeria. And then, of course, the southwestern part of Nigeria is also the cradle of the Yoruba ethnic group. According to National Population Commission, 38.9 million of 46 million populace are Yoruba, which means that predominantly Yoruba are practically distributed in this region. And then this region comprises 6 states. We are seeing Oyo, Ogun, Lagos State, Osun, Ekiti, and Ondo State. And of course, without any more evidence, we can conclude that this will be the most diverse geopolitical zone. Why? Because of the characteristic features of this particular region. All right, so let's go to the education commodification in the southwestern Nigeria. Why the commodification? All right, it's worth noting that according to statistics, the literacy level in this region is 89% male and 80.6% female, which means that this particular number of people are enrolled in educational institutions. That's what it means. So we have 89% males and 80.6% female, which is quite a very huge number. And this, of course, is one of the largest in this, one of the highest region that has highest education enrollment in the whole of the country. And then also the implication of this is that the region is gradually moving, not even gradually, the region is moving at a very fast pace from an agrarian economy to a more capitalist economy. And then another very important thing to know in the discourse of education commodification is the hegemonic dominance of English language in this region. And of course, unlike in the northern part of Nigeria, where we have the Hausas and the Fulanis, or let's say majorly Hausas, the language usage is very high in the north, just as it is in the east. If you go to the east, the Igbo usage is, the indigenous language usage in the east, which is Igbo majorly, is used compared to when you get to the southwestern Nigeria. And why is it so in this region? It is so in this region because the English language is fanciful and an important marker of status. So a lot of people get into school, and then the way you can know that you are actually educated is in the quantum or in the number of the big English you can speak, or in the number of expression, or in the number in the level of communication, or in the level of depth that you have in English language. And also by implication, what it means is that the more people get into school, the more higher they go up the education ladder, the less contact they have with their social-cultural environment. And then also important to note that another critical issue to look at in this context is what I tag the vernacularization of Yoruba language. And this is a repressive tool of what's it called, that legitimizes English language as the most acceptable and the only acceptable language of medium of communication within the corridors of learning in the region. And what do I mean by that? Indigenous language are prohibited, even right from the elementary school, as a medium of communication. So students are beaten, PPs are beaten, and they say, no, you shouldn't speak English, you shouldn't speak vernacular, you shouldn't speak vernacular. And then everybody is expected to speak in English language. And the more people get used to this, the more it's also impact on the sociocultural reproduction in terms of language use. And of course, this is not an attempt to underscore or discount the importance of formal education, but the impact on indigenous knowledge is a critical question to sociocultural reproduction and sustainability in the region. Of course, what are the way out to this quagmire? Of course, I would also subscribe.
Deji, sorry, I have to interrupt you. You have just a minute more.
All right, yeah, I'm done. So in this discourse, I also have to subscribe to decolonizing education, which I also support the work of Mustafa in promoting bilingualism or plurilingualism of English and local languages. And this will involve accepting, popularizing, and institutionalizing indigenous languages in this region. All right, so in conclusion, I have 3 things: to preserve historical traditions, value and sociocultural ethos at the grassroots. There should be deliberate revaluing of the language use and veneration of sociocultural engagement and knowledge. And secondly, similarly, education institutions should be a platform for the unfolding and regeneration of knowledge without excluding indigenous or local epistemology. And lastly, curriculum should be reviewed to integrate indigenous perspective and Western perspective in reconstituting holistic knowledge that is culturally inclusive and socially relevant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deji, for that exciting presentation. Again, we can give a virtual hand clap to Deji. I know that these issues, all of these issues need more than 10 minutes for in-depth discussion. Unfortunately, we can only do 10 minutes. So this is the time for questions. I see one question here for you. I put it in the chat. Do you think that the schools are following the colonial model in regard to language of instruction, and why?
All right, yes, I would agree. And then, of course, at the same point, I would also declare that there is no external impression from outside or within the colonial rule that says we should follow that. But of course, I will also blame the government or the stakeholders in the educational sector. Of course, nobody is monitoring the use of English language, but of course, right now, what is obtainable is that you find out that English language is acceptable. And then, of course, like I mentioned in the presentation, indigenous language is banned unless when you're having the course, let's say Yoruba, doing Yoruba in school. So it's practically, of course, that's what is obtainable. That's what has been given to us. So English language is still, the dominant. With no recognition for indigenous knowledge. Thank you.
Excellent. A second question. Do you agree to a total overhauling of the educational curriculum in Nigeria? Why?
Oh, no, I won't. All right. Like for instance, I propose in some of the things I propose is a review and not a total overhauling, because I mentioned that in my discussion that this is not a point to underscore the importance of formal education, but what we are saying is that there should be an inclusiveness in the sense that indigenous education should also be included, not only just as a course that you study, because if you check the curriculum, let's say, for instance, indigenous language can only be studied as a course, maybe from secondary school, first year, second year, third year, or maybe till the sixth year. And afterwards, you don't have any contact with indigenous knowledge. And of course, if we are not talking about language, what about history? Automatically, that is not there. So what I will propose is that there should be an avenue for inclusiveness and not necessarily an overhauling. Yeah.
Thank you, Deji. I take the license as moderator to ask my question also. I think that I see some similarities between the Nigerian situation and Ghanaian. And my question would be that concerning the language of instruction, what will be your proposal? Because, for example, you talk of the Yorubas, but you know that today, because of migration, rural-urban migration, for example, in Accra, you can't say that there are only Gans, like one ethnic group, as it used to be, or as it might have been in the past. So like settings are becoming increasingly cosmopolitan with different ethnic groups, different languages. What would be a pragmatic approach concerning language of instruction in such settings?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. Of course, this is very tricky because, like I mentioned, there is a lot of diversity in the region, especially in Southwest, because of the economy, because of the access to education. So you have virtually, practically, let's say, for instance, Lagos State, you have virtually representation of maybe all or close to all ethnic groups and languages that you have in Nigeria. And Nigeria alone, as I've recorded, has like over 500 languages registered. So this, what I would just suggest is, of course, is also maybe find a way of including indigenous knowledge from the scratch. Let's say elementary, from primary school, primary 1, basic 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let people speak frequently. I mean, if you get to the eastern part of the country, I mean, you can't just get by to someone just speaking English to you. Even in schools, even in the corporate sector, they speak in their indigenous language, and that doesn't mean that they don't know how to speak in English. Of course, if they also speak in English, you know that, okay, they actually, so that sense of accepting and also placing value on indigenous language is very, very important. Not that you say, okay, this is a vernacular, you don't speak it, it's prohibited. And then you have the more educated people become, the less usage they have with their languages. So I would just, from the grassroots, let something be done to it. Let there be acceptance of indigenous language as also language, not just the lingua franca English. So if it is not English, it is nothing. So I would suggest that there should be inclusion at the grassroots.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
We have a plethora of questions coming in. Is there interest in this topic at a political and institutional level in terms of activism?
Oh, is it objectively from my hand or in the global perspective?
I think in the Nigerian setting.
All right.
Is there interest in the topic at a political and institutional level in terms of activism?
Well, of course, maybe not in the southwestern part of the country, because for me, it seems as though there is in the nonchalancy, kind of nobody cares whether the language is going into extinction. And for now, maybe we just have a few people that what's it called, canvassing for the use, and then there are people that saying, oh, before we know it, there's likely of language loss in this region. But of course, in the northern part, for instance, let me say, for instance, when you go to Abuja, which is the Federal Capital Territory, when you have northerners in the particular office, there's nothing you can do about it. If they don't want to speak in English, they don't want to. They venerate their own languages. Maybe it's also obtainable in the eastern part, but because of the dynamism of the southwestern part, that's why it's very important that this, as because of course I remember that recently there was also a conference on this particular topic of the what's it called, veneration of Yoruba language in the southwestern part of Nigeria. It was organized by Bowen University. So maybe politically from the north and the eastern and maybe southern, but for southwestern Africa, southwestern Nigeria, it's not really a topic of debate.
Okay, I have to apologize in advance that the questions that are coming are so many that we cannot possibly address all of them here. Please, if your question is not addressed, it's not because it's not relevant, but it's just because we are hard pressed for time. So I ask these final two questions because I see that they are related. One, could Pidgin be an inclusive form of standardizing language of teaching for the whole Federal Republic? And second, interesting topic, does Nigerian Pidgin English used in the southern part also have a chance to be part of the curriculum in the country, example among the Yoruba?
All right, thank you very much for that question. Of course, I think the topic here is not the standardization of a language. If there is a standardization of language, English is sufficient enough, because practically everywhere it's English language and people can relate on that level. Of course, Pidgin English is also a very good language that can also be ingrained into, or standardized or legitimized into the language use. But the important thing that we are trying to hammer here is the importance of indigenous language. And why is indigenous language very important? It's very important because it's a marker of identity. It links us to our cultural, identity. This is what I'm saying. Say you have a Yoruba that cannot even greet, does not know the rudimentary, what's it called, understanding of the language, can't greet in the language, can't communicate in the language. So you can imagine how easier it will be for the person to relate with the origin, the identity, the history of his own root. So the issue here is not standardization. If it's standardization, we have, of course, the formal one, English, and even Pidgin language is also Pidgin is semi-standardized in the sense that virtually everybody, every corner, go to every corridor of Nigeria, you see people speaking that particular language. However, what's the emphasis here is on indigenous language, because even if we standardize Pidgin, it still boils down back that Pidgin is not our indigenous languages. So
thank you, Deji. Yeah. I feel that if you had enough time, you'd be able to do justice to these topics more. But yes, again, we are hard pressed for time. So this is the reason we have the final 10 minutes after this, so that you can interact more with the speakers. And we also have their email addresses in the program outline, so you can always communicate with them after here. Again, another virtual hand clap for Deji. Yes, thank you very much. So we move to the next presentation. We have with us Akambi Nuruddin. I hope I pronounced the name right. He is going to be speaking on the right to quality education, inclusiveness and children education in Nigeria public primary and secondary schools. Akambi is a bachelor's degree holder, and he had his studies. He studied at Tai Soleran University of Education, Nigeria, focusing on political science education. He describes himself as a young professional with interest in the research and development of education, teaching and learning, and is highly motivated by the great deficit of quality education in Nigeria. So, Mr. Akambi Nuruddin, please feel free to dazzle us in the next 10 minutes. Okay, so I assume that he's not here. I'm going to quickly move on to our next presenter, and hopefully if we have the next, Akambi join us, we'll have him come for the last session. So we are going to listen to Abiud, my own friend and colleague in the AMAS program. His research interests are in education for sustainable development, sociology of education, and global citizenship education and community development. He has a Bachelor's of Arts degree in sociology from University of Nairobi, Kenya. So, Mr. Abiud, please, the floor is very much yours.
Okay, thank you, Kelvin. It's a pleasure to be here and to share with you some findings from our study. It was a systematic review, so if you will allow me, let me share my slides. Okay, thank you. So I hope you can see my slides, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk briefly about the dynamics of education for all in Kenya. And in particular, I'm going to look at the search for better education and the rise of low-cost private schools. So just to draw your attention to two key terms that I'm going to refer to throughout the presentation, I will talk about public primary schools and low-cost private schools. And in this regard, I will be referring to public primary schools as those primary schools which are run and supported by the government, and low-cost private schools are those non-state schools which are not entirely supported by the government. So within the allocated time, if possible, we're going to look at the foundations of education for all, and then we'll also look at the objectives that the review was addressing. We'll also talk about the etymology of free primary education in Kenya, and we'll also look at the concept of low-cost private schools in Kenya. And lastly, we'll also look at some of the findings and recommendations from the study. So whenever we talk about education for all, free primary education, then we have to go back to three key important milestones. And these are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted in 1948. And this declared that every child has a right to education. Also, we have to look at the World Conference on Education for All, which was held in Jomtien, Thailand in 1990. And particularly this conference sparked a new phase towards basic education with its vision and renewed commitment towards its achievement. And lastly, I have to draw your attention to the 2000 Dakar Conference on Education for All, which reviewed the progress made and pledged to achieve universal primary education by the year 2015. This was closely supported by the Millennium Development Goals, in particular goal number 2 on achieving universal primary education. So I will not talk about the others because I will leave it at this point, bearing in mind that Kenya started implementing free primary education after the Millennium Development Goals were introduced. That was in 2003. So our review was looking to find answers as to why low-cost private schools are on the increase in Kenya, in particular after the introduction and the start of implementation of free primary education since 2003, and why parents enroll children in fee-paying private primary schools when ideally they can enroll their children in free public primary schools. So just to look at a brief history of free primary education in Kenya, we will start with the post-independence government. This is immediately after the Kenyan Republic gained its independence in 1963. So the then KANU government identified education, among others, as one of the most important pillars in national development. As a result, the government pledged or committed to the implementation of not full free primary education between 1963 to 1989, but this was a partial free primary education scheme. So during this period, parents were only required to provide school uniform to their children and only pay partial school fees. So this partial free primary education between 1963 and 1989 was meant for school-going children between grades 1 to grade 7. This was at a time when the Republic was implementing a 7-6-3 education system whereby children or pupils or students were meant to spend 7 years in primary school, 6 years in post-primary school, and 3 years in tertiary institutions. So what happened to this partial free primary education that was implemented between 1963 and 1989? If we can recall the oil crisis of the 1970s and the economic recessions of the 80s made it unattainable for most sub-Saharan African countries, and in particular for Kenya, to continue the implementation of this program. So in 1999, just 5 years after the introduction of a new education scheme, which was an 8-for-4 education system, the country was forced to stop this particular partial free primary education. So when I talk about the 8-for-4 system, this was a shift from the 7-6-3 to 8-for-4, where pupils or students were to spend 8 years in primary school, 4 years in secondary school, and 4 years in tertiary institutions. So between 1989 to 2003, that's close to 12 years, parents were forced to cater for all their children's needs as regards to education, pay school fees, provide uniforms, and also transport where necessary. So fast forward to 2003, what happened? So I will start with 2002. Kenya went into a general election in the year 2002, December of 2002. And this was after the country was under the KANU regime for almost 24 years with the then the late President Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi. So in 2002, all opposition parties came together and formed a coalition with the aim of ascending to power. And one of their major campaign agenda was the introduction and implementation of free primary education with the start of the new school year in 2003. And this was one of the reasons that propelled the opposition to power at the beginning of the 2003. So as they ascended to power, they had to honor the pledge that they made to the Kenyans. And so they started the implementation of free primary education again. But this time round, parents were only required to provide school uniform to their children. But this new implementation phase of 2003 to date was only meant to address issues to do with education in public primary schools, schools which were run by the state. This did not at any point involve private schools at this time. So what about the concept of low-cost private schools in Kenya and elsewhere in the world? I think we all understand that in nearly every country in the world, and more particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, there's the concept of low-cost private schools is present. These low-cost private schools or non-state schools have been present in the education system in the provision of education alongside the existing public-run education system. So the history of private sector education and schools in Kenya dates back to independence, when we had a few private schools which were under maybe the then existing non-government organizations or faith-based organizations or community-based organizations, and a few of them were owned by individuals which were meant for profit. So, and most of these private schools at the time were only meant for the elites, people who had money, those in government, and part of the colonial officials who had remained in Kenya immediately after independence. So statistics shows that by the year 2008, this was 5 years after the start of the new phase of free primary education in the year 2003, 25% of primary schools in Kenya were private schools. So you can imagine when you're talking about Kenya and having 25% of the primary schools being private schools. This translates to an increase of from 1,441 private primary schools in the year 2002, just before the country started implementing free primary education, to at least or approximately 8,285 private schools in the year 2012. And as of 2016, statistics showed that approximately 30% of the primary schools in the country were private schools. So what is the big question about this private schools?
Again, you have 1 minute to go.
Okay, fine. So what is the big question about private schools? Why are parents enrolling their children in low-cost private schools? One is the geographical proximity and resource distribution. Most of the public schools are not close home. So children as young as 5 years old are forced to walk for at least 3 kilometers before they can get to school. So parents prefer to enroll their children in low-cost schools, which are neighborhood schools, which they can access easily. So there's also an issue of class size and pupil-teacher ratio. You realize that with the implementation of free primary education, the enrollment rates were very high. So most of the public schools are crowded. And according to the Teacher Service Commission, which employs and deploys teachers, they said that a class size or the pupil-teacher ratio should be 40:1. But in most public schools, you find that it's either 60 or 80:1, as compared to private schools, which have at least 25.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I have to end here. Thank you very much. Please, a virtual hand clap for him. Yeah, so we already have a question, and this is like a cluster of questions. So why is the private sector the solution for education for all? What is the evidence of this? Is it because they are low cost, where the cost is reduced? How do you relate the current situation to the structural adjustment programs and the lack of public investment in the education sector?
Okay, thank you. That's a very important question. So currently people view, or Kenyans view the low-cost private schools as an alternative to quality or better education in the country. One, because yes, some of them are low-cost, they're cheap as compared to the free primary education, because still in these public schools, parents are forced to pay for other fees, examination fees, activity fees, and all those things. And the main reason why most of them view these private schools as an alternative to quality education in Kenya is on the performance index. If you look at studies done most recently, they indicate that pupils who go to private schools tend to perform better as compared to those who go to public schools. As recent as last week, there were exam results released for the class of 2020. These were exams which were postponed from last year due to COVID to this year. The exams were done in January, and the results in March shows that the performance index for private schools is much higher as compared to those in public schools. And another thing is that most parents believe that if you enroll your pupil or your child in private schools, they will have a better opportunity or a better chance to be able to be enrolled in a better secondary school in the country. In Kenya, we have different levels of secondary schools, and you can only join a particular second school based on how better you performed in your primary school. So they believe if you enroll your child in a private school, they will be able to perform better and hence go to a better secondary school.
Thank you very much. So there's another question here. Have you looked at the influence of organizations such as UNICEF, UNESCO, Gates Foundation, etc., had on the government for free education? What about conditionality and consequences on the quality of the curriculum?
Okay, UNICEF and UNESCO, very importantly, they are one of the major players of education when you talk about education, and especially UNESCO when you talk about Sustainable Development Goal number 4. So what I will say about their influence, I will address it in two directions. One is a positive influence and one is a negative influence. The positive influence is that there are programs which are run by UNICEF or UNESCO, which are beneficial, which increase enrollment in public primary schools. But again, these programs or these influences do not improve in a way or support the provision of quality education in these public schools. Because if I can give you an example of a program run by UNESCO, which was run by UNESCO in Kenya, was a feeding program whereby pupils could attend school just to receive meals over lunchtime. So this drew a lot of pupils to these schools. But the question is this: when you provide these programs, how about the human resource? You have a school which has 1,000 pupils because they're coming to school to receive meals over lunchtime, but the school only has 20 teachers. So how are they going to handle these schools and ensure that there's proper learning in the classrooms? So I will say it's both negative and they have their advantages and disadvantages. Yes, they are helping in making sure that there is access to education, pupils are accessing schools. But again, on the other side, we need to find a way to make sure that there is a correlation between the enrollment and the human resource that is needed, which in most cases is not properly factored in by the programs that most of, let's say, the donor agencies or most of the international NGOs, the programs that they implement in sub-Saharan Africa or in Kenya in particular.
Thank you. Another question for you. The research also shows that the better results from private schools are related to social cultural conditions and schools' selection of students. What do you think about this?
Okay. Let's start with school selection. One thing I will say, at no point do students or pupils have, in particular, like the case of Kenya, have the chance to choose a school to go to. If you look at the choice theory, you find that parents are the ones who are going to make a decision on which particular school they're going to join. But then again, it's not only about the selection. It's only about what really happens in these schools, other than just selecting the school to go to and going there and performing. Because you will select a school to go to, but you will go to that school if there are no proper, there's no proper teaching, there's no proper human resource, there are no learning materials, then performance is not going to be there. So what happens in these private schools is that there is proper management, for example. And I will address this using teacher motivation and human resource. If you look at the teachers in private schools, they are highly motivated. One, because they're only responsible to, or they're only accountable to the employer and the parents. And their motivation is from the factor that if the pupils are performing well, if we have more pupils, then you're meant to earn more. But if you look at their public primary school counterparts, they earn, especially in primary schools, they earn little money or very, very less. And these teachers in public schools, they're consistently in strike, agitating for a pay increment from the government. So it's not just about school selection, but it's all about the conditions under which the students are in those particular schools or what happens in those particular schools.
Okay, thank you. Maybe the final question. In Nigeria, private schools are way too costly. And I'm particularly concerned about how private schools are low cost in Kenya. How does this concept work?
Okay, so we talked about, okay, this is what we missed, particularly towards the end of the presentation. So we talked about low cost private schools. But when you talk about private schools in the country, we have different cadres of private schools. So the first cadre we have is what we call the international schools. These international schools are the most expensive schools that you can ever find in the Republic, and not everybody can join these particular schools. And then we have what we call middle-class private schools. These are private schools, yes, where parents pay more money, but then we have the low-cost private schools. These are the schools which are in the neighborhood. That's what, they're very small schools, where the pupils are paying as little as 30 euros or 30 euros per term. That translates to 90 euros in a whole year. So not all schools are going to be cheap, but when you look at the idea of low-cost private schools, these are schools which charge very little money just to make sure that they're serving people within their neighborhood, not all schools. We have different cadres of schools. They are the most expensive, but we also have the low cost. And the phenomena we were looking at are the low cost private schools, which are the majority private schools that we have in the country. If you look at the international schools, which are the most expensive, they're countable. There are not so many. But if you look at the low cost private schools, there are so many schools.
Okay, thank you very much. And there's no other questions. So another virtual hand clap for Mr. Abud Busiri.
Thank you.
Okay, so as you know, this was supposed to have been the final presentation, but we ran into a little challenge. So we will now listen to Mr. Kambi Nuruddin, whom I have already introduced.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, no worries, you go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes, now we can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much. I won't be able to share my screen. Sylvia is gonna be helping me to get. I'm gonna be speaking on rights to quality education, inclusiveness, and children education in Nigeria public primary and secondary schools. It is a known fact that primary and secondary education have not been doing well in Nigeria over the years. And the reason for this is not far-fetched. There are many reasons that can be attributed for it. It's a known fact that education is central to sustainable development goals, and it is necessary for achieving individual goals and aspirations in the I hope you can still hear me now. So
yes, I think it's just better if you. Yes, I think it's just better if you.
Okay. I'm gonna be talking about the public education and primary school education in Nigeria now. In Nigeria, there are over 65% of Nigerian children that attend public primary schools, while about 50% attend public secondary schools. This is to tell you that public schooling in Nigeria seems to be a very, very big deal to people, because private schooling in Nigeria is very, very expensive and most parents cannot afford it. And thus, they go for public primary and secondary schools. However, if you look at primary school in Nigeria, it's supposed to be a place where the children will receive their right from childhood up to age 9 or 11, as the case may be, and while secondary school is for the university level. But in Nigeria, primary and secondary school, especially the public ones, have not been doing well over the years. Hence, there is an increase in dropouts over the years. Students have been dropping out because there is no quality education. There is always shortage of teachers. Let me talk about the core issues now, core problems of primary and secondary Nigeria. Now, the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the increase in dropouts. There is high increase in the rate of school dropouts among Nigerian children, which is not supposed to be. If this situation should continue unhindered, there is no way we can achieve quality education as enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals, especially the Goal 4, aiming for quality education. There is no way we can get this if we continue with this kind of thing. And our government have not really been doing so well regarding that aspect. Another thing is classroom size now. Many areas of the country in Nigeria, they are faced with a situation whereby you have about 80 students in a very, very small classroom. There is no way for quality education. There's no way for quality learning. There's no way for quality understanding and thoughts. This is a very, very big problem confronting the Nigerian state. The third thing I'm going to talk about is the neglect by government now. On many occasions, teachers and the stakeholders have always channeled grievances, actions, and all kinds of necessity just to ensure that they are being heard and that the government takes a practical step regarding the issue on ground. However, most are from low and middle class people. Like I said earlier, private school is very, very expensive in Nigeria, and it is only the children of the rich, the politicians, the elites, hence public schools is neglected and is regarded as the old school for middle class. So that's why schools have been neglected, and there is an issue with that. Another problem with primary and secondary school education in Nigeria is that inadequate promotion of technical education. This is always inadequate, and this has always been an issue over the years. But yet, nothing much has been done regarding this in Nigeria. If anything has to do with the public, successive governments seem to be neglecting them for no reason, only God knows. So, to a particular extent, it becomes very hard for the children of the poor to have quality education. And this is a problem that is befalling our country today. Another thing is administrative problem. In that there is no effective monitoring and implementation of educational policies. Although educational policies are being made at the center, at the upper level, at the federal government level, fine. But these policies are not properly implemented. As such, to some extent, they are not monitored. And it is a very, very big challenge and big issue affecting the Nigerian state. So other challenges that is befalling primary and secondary education in Nigeria include decline in terms of curriculum. Our curriculum are not well drafted. The ones we've been using since 1980s are the ones we are still using today. There hasn't been review, there hasn't been additional modification or something. The reviews they claim to do are not really adequate. This is posing a very, very serious threat to the educational sector in the country. Also, there is inadequate teaching equipment. Take, for instance, while we were making research in some public secondary schools in Lagos State, a teacher in the chemistry department was telling us that they had no access to some laboratory instruments or instruments, equipment that they need for practicalizing to the students what they've been teaching them. And that's a serious problem. Another thing is that there's inadequate number of teaching and non-teaching staff. During my second internship at my final year at the university level, I did my teaching internship at a low-cost public secondary school. I studied quality education in Nigeria. Quality education is really lacking in this country. There is inadequate number of teaching staff. For instance, the senior secondary schools has 3 classes, 3 departments: science, commercial, and arts. And you can imagine they have just 4 teachers to take care of all the students, irrespective of the departments. That is impossible. How will they acquire good education? So that's the problem we're facing in this country. Now, because of my time, I will quickly run through policy recommendations and conclusion. Decline in quality of public education, both in terms of safety and curriculum, is worrisome as the case continued over the years. With the present look of things, if the situation continues, inclusive and quality education will not be achieved in Nigeria. As a result, I'm going to quickly give some recommendations in which, if properly harnessed, could help us develop and engender a kind of inclusive and quality education in the country. And we hope that our government look into some of these recommendations and be right. The first one is establishment of more schools. I said earlier that students match themselves in a classroom that's supposed to be for about, let's say 30 students. You'll be seeing about 80, 90 students there, which is very, very wrong. There's no way they could get quality education there. Another thing is there should be provision of adequate instructional materials. Instructional materials are very, very lacking in most public secondary schools in Nigeria today. And this is posing a serious threat to the educational sector of the country. The third recommendation I'm going to be suggesting is that there should be adequate supervision and the monitoring squad should be strengthened. Government job in Nigeria is mostly neglected. Most people do it in a way that they believe that the government is not here, the state governor will not come, so they can do it. Some teachers will not even go to school for no just reason, which is very, 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 very wrong. And yes, they're collecting their salaries. So there should be proper monitoring and there should be proper implementation of educational policies too. Supervision of schools should be strengthened. And lastly, before I go, I'm going to talk about professional education and training. I think there should be regular workshops, seminars, conferences, orientations, and reorientation for government school teachers or public school teachers so that they know what they are into, they know what they are supposed to do, they know their work and they do it adequately. Because the way education, especially public education is in Nigeria, I came up with this research, this paper. I identified these problems and I look for a way I can gather information and drop some of the information I'm giving here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was amazing to work within the time. And we already have, before the questions, please, as usual, a virtual hand clap. So we already have some questions for you. The first one is, how did you arrive at the fact that the curriculum has not been revised since 1980? Why then do we have NUC, UBEC? I think you'll have to explain to our audience what NUC and UBEC means so that we can understand better.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, apart from the fact that I have 6 years of experience in education, I also studied at a university of education, and I have a lot of educational experiences too. So regarding the issue of NUC is to manage Nigerian universities and not primary and secondary education. NUC is for universities alone. So when you're talking about the case of NUC, you should know that NUC is to monitor tertiary institutions. It simply means Nigeria Universities Commission. Now, regarding the UBEC that you mentioned, UBEC means Universal Basic Educational something like that. Yeah, those are the ones in charge. They claim to be reviewing these things, but it's my field. Like I said earlier, I went through it, and like most of our lecturers normally say, like we looked at it, some of the things they are teaching us, even when we're very young, is the things they are still giving out to these students, unlike their private counterparts, whereby they are very, very innovative and creative in terms of their curriculum and teaching techniques. So looking at this, you will see that education in public primary and secondary schools in Nigeria still remains a challenge. It hasn't met up to standards to which it was created for. If you go to private schools, you will see the difference. And the difference is very, very clear in the students' outcome, their achievement in examinations, their participation in social competitions. And in fact, it's such a disgrace that public schooling in Nigeria is facing that kind of hard time. Thank you.
Thank you. To another question for you. What is the sample size that gave rise to this conclusion? Private, public, etc.
Okay, yeah, thank you very, okay, yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we gathered information from 6 teachers, 3 primary school teachers from Ogun State in Nigeria, and we also talked to 3 secondary school teachers in Lagos State, Nigeria. And while we were talking to one of the teachers in Lagos State, like I said earlier, the teacher said she's a chemistry teacher, and they have no equipments to take care and to practicalize what they've been teaching these students, especially those in the chemical science. So also, aside this sample size, my first internship took place in a Nigerian public secondary school. My second internship also took place in a Nigerian public secondary school. Like I said, I went to University of Education. I did education all my life. Now, during my internship, like I said earlier, it serves as an eye-opener and an enlightenment to me. I see the need for quality education in Nigeria. Quality education is really, really, really deficit in this country. Take, for instance, where I did my second internship, the students can barely speak correct English, and they claim to be in senior secondary schools. Like, there are some of the innovative ideas that I bring forward to them, and they will be like, wow, they are surprised. I was like, you should have done these things in your preliminary levels of classes. But they are lacking is because they went to public schools all their life. This cannot be compared to their private counterparts. So there is a problem somewhere, and there is a fire on the mountain. So I hope the government sees some distance, make proper amendments.
Okay, thank you. We also have another question. Do you think the private sector is key to achieve education for all in Nigeria?
Well, actually, I'm a Democrat. Yeah, I'm a Democrat in the sense that I wouldn't say there should be scrapping or something. I would say that private should exist fine. They should exist. They should have their liberty and freedom. But I would say that this is the key for achieving quality education in Nigeria. If our governments are up to standard, if they are competent enough and are very, very inclined to do the people's will, I'm telling you, we won't be the one to tell the private schools. Like, when the government schools are up to standard and are providing quality, inclusive education, a kind of education that can be compared to none in the country, private schools won't even survive. But in a situation where private schools are doing better than the public schools, to some extent, anybody can say, yes, private school is the key to quality education in Nigeria, because for now, they are delivering the best education stuffs now. They are one of the best now. So I wouldn't say they are the key to achieving quality education in Nigeria. We only employ our governments to do the needful. And because successive governments, since we returned to democracy in 1999, have been trying their best to, but a lot has not been done regarding the education sector. For instance, since 1999 to date, I don't think the percentage for education in Nigerian budget has ever been above 13%. I don't think so. Can you imagine? That's to tell you the extent to which they value education. So I wish our government can just value education like they do. They make it inclusive and they make it well arranged, well structured. Then I think government education still remains the key to achieving quality education, only if our government do the right thing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And the last set of questions, 2 in 1. Could you comment on the issue of safety? Do parents hold back from sending their children to school because of safety issues? And number 2, what are your recommendations for building educational infrastructure deficits in Nigeria? What are your recommendations?
Yeah, thank you very much. These are important questions. I love the first question. During my final semester, I embarked on a particular research with a friend, and the research was insecurity and national development in Nigeria, Fourth Republic, where we explored the phenomenon of insecurity in Nigeria, ranging from kidnapping to banditry to Boko Haram and to other insecurity issues. And yes, in northern part of this country, and maybe probably not, it's not eastern part of this country, some parents have been holding back their children from attending schools. Insecurity and safety issues in this country have made some parents to have discouraged them from sending their wards to school. I can say that emphatically. There are facts that go from that on not northern part of this country and northeastern parts of these countries too. So that is a very, very clear issue, but that is not common in every part of the country. Insecurity in Nigeria is all over the country, but it is more tense in some area than the other. So that is the first question on safety and education in Nigeria. Now, the second question, sorry, the question was, what do I recommend on providing educational infrastructure and good education in Nigeria, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, good. Like, what I will say is that as a political science education student, I will firstly recommend the government to give a very, very large proportion of the Nigerian budget to education, because we know the role of education in development. I don't know, maybe the governments do not know, but the role in which education plays in development cannot be overemphasized. Education is very, very central to sustainable development. It is a means through which individuals identify their needs. In fact, when there is quality education, insecurity will cease. There will be peace, harmony, and coherence in the society. So I'm imploring the governments to try as much as possible to give a larger proportion or percentage of the Nigerian budgets to education. How will you make a budget of the country and give 7% to education? It's wrong, 8% to education. I mean, what are you trying to implement? With the current deficit of quality education we have, there's shortage of teacher, there's shortage of teaching equipment, and it's very, very wrong. So that's the very first thing I will recommend. Then secondly, part of the recommendation I gave during my presentation is that there should be adequate supervision and monitoring. Like, there should be proper implementation of government policies. Government do claim they make policies, but these policies are not properly monitored. For instance, Abuja is a federal territory. You make a law there regarding education, and there's no proper implementation. There's no proper monitoring. There's no proper supervision. These teachers can just do anyhow they like. Like I said, when I went to do my internship, I saw a lot. Some teachers will not even come to school on a normal day at all. They just
ran out of time, so if you can just summarize this point.
Okay, thank you very much. So I'm suggesting 3 key recommendations. The first one is that governments should try to give larger percentage of Nigerian budgets to education. And secondly, there should be proper implementation of government policies. And thirdly, there should be provision of adequate instructional materials. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you for everyone who has asked a question. This is how far we can come today. We want to really thank our presenters. Thank you for these awesome thoughts that you have shared with us. Thank you, all participants. At this time, we are going to quickly have some closing remarks from one person who doesn't need any introduction because he has already spoken, Oladeji. But let me add that he is the AMAS representative in Erasmus Mundus, and he speaks to us now in that capacity.
All right, thank you very much, Calvin. On behalf of the European Interdisciplinary Masters African Studies, Erasmus Mundus Association, I want to commemorate with the organizers of this intensive conference, yet enjoyable one. And then also, more importantly, to the Center of African Studies, University of Porto, for creating a platform for discussion and conversations around sustainable development goals, particularly in sub-Saharan African country. All right, so thank you very much for organizing this particular conference. And also lastly, my appreciation also goes to the doggedness of the participants who have been here since morning. I mean, it's really an intensive one from almost like 6 or 7 hours back. And then you've been here also contributing and spurring conversations around this topical discourse of sustainable development goals. All right, so thank you very much. I hope subsequently we still have platforms like this where critical issues around sustainable development goals, particularly in Africa, and then will be discussed. All right, thank you very much. And then from the Emma, I bring the greetings.
Thank you, Deji. So the final words for today will be given by Professor Amelia Polonia. She is a full professor at the Department of History, Political and International Studies, the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, University of Porto. She's also the Dean of the AMAS program, the very prestigious AMAS program that you've been hearing so much about Yes, she's the dean of the program and the scientific coordinator of SYSTEM. SYSTEM is Transdisciplinary Research Center, Culture, Space, and Memory. And her main area of interest is colonial studies, with special focus on global studies, gender studies, and the environmental impacts of colonial dynamics in the early modern period. Before we listen to her, please let me make the short announcement that one of the participants, Unyemi, has just shared in the chat a registration link for an upcoming program on youth inclusiveness in agricultural transformation for sustainable food systems in Nigeria. The date is May 6th, as you see, and you have the registration link there. If you are interested, please feel free to register in the forms there, I suppose. So, Prof. Amelia, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelvin. And the good thing is that your presentation was longer than my intervention, my final intervention at this event. It has been an intensive and very profitable day, which I'm very pleased to join you, I mean, in a visible form just now, because I attend as much as I could during the day. So in a more formal way, I would like, first of all, to thank the organizers. I'm sorry, because now I minimize the screen. So I would formally thank the organizers for this invitation. It was a great debate, a great day, and gave me the opportunity to look again to the faces of those I miss already from Porto, the EMA students, but obviously gave me also the opportunity to learn and to listen many other participants from Portugal and from this global virtual world, and learn and really learn with so different experiences that were given testimony here today. And obviously, besides the formal organizing committee, I would also to congratulate the Center for African Studies for this initiative, which I hope will replicate with the success of this one. I have also to say that you are competing today with this high-level UA Africa Green Investment Forum. So I was divided between two screens and the two initiatives, one at a kind of central EU high level, but you won my attention because really were very interesting, all the interventions and the participations. So then we go again and again, and I don't know if we will resist until 2030 to speak about these so challenging global goals. And it is obviously sometimes some criticism because people go around and around, but it's not a criticism from me. On the opposite, I think there are times in which we need to focus, and we need to focus our attention in the urgently topics that should be really debated and addressed in the very direct way. So those UN global goals are the sustainable goals for sustainable development goals are really a pretext to speak about so many things that you did today. So this was topics on education, on gender issues, on health and healthcare, issues on inclusion and inclusiveness, and all that in a comparative perspective. Giving testimony of so many experiences in Africa. I think it was just a great contribution to what we aim, not certainly until 2030, but beyond, which is precisely making the utopia reality. So this is really a kind of a challenge that we should address. I'm convinced of that, and you did today in a wonderful way. So this was an international, multicultural, multidisciplinary, cross-border meeting, and I think it was really challenging, and I think the 10 minutes each one of the participants had were very well taken by each one of you, but would give much food for thought, and we could see by the debate and the questions that would put forward for so many participants. And as I see them today, it will be a kind of a challenge for future meetings. At the same time, I think it was clear here the importance of creating this kind of multi-level, let's call it, or multi-partners cooperation. Here we have seen researchers, we have seen also high education, postgraduate professors and students, and all answer to issues that are directly connected with societal challenges. So this kind of triad, and the society obviously includes research and includes higher education, is central nowadays, and it's central in all the subjects, but mostly when debating the current issues of Africa and relations of Africa with Europe and beyond. So I don't want to go further, just again, congratulations all of you, thanking you for the invitation, because it took me away from my papers, from my bureaucracies, and made me really share with you this day of reflection, which was really a pleasure for me, besides the personal pleasure of seeing so many faces and to learn so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Polonia. So we have officially closed, but if you'll indulge me, I want to tell you a little bit about the organizing unit for this conference. So the Center of African Studies of Porto University is an organization of research and multidisciplinary cooperation founded in 1997. And basically it assembles researchers, university lecturers, and students from national and international institutions. The work that we do at the center is largely in three categories. So the first is that it's a research unit supported by FCT. I'm sorry, my Portuguese cannot allow me to say FCT in full, since 1999. Yeah. And this unit covers several scientific areas, mainly human and social sciences, and builds up theoretical and applied research on Africa. Then second, it's also a scientific society that cooperates with FLUP. FLUP is the faculty of Faculdade de Letras da Universidade do Porto. So the Faculty of Arts at the University of Porto, in organizing and lecturing courses on African studies, promote international exchange between lecturers and organizes academic meetings. And finally, we also have activities directed to the building and cooperation in projects of development and education for development within the framework of national and international institutions operating in Africa. So you see that we've already shared with you our handles, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, so you can follow us. Again, thank you all very much for your participation. It's been amazing to be the moderator for this session, and I hope that we get to meet and discuss and engage and talk about more interesting research in the future. Thank you, and ciao, ciao, adios.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Yeah.
Tchau. Obrigado a todos. Tchau, tchau.
It was a pleasure. Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all.
Thank you all. Ciao, ciao.
Bye-bye.